everyone. Welcome to Hunting for Silver Linings. Today is Tuesday, June 8th here in the Great Lakes region of the United States. I am Corey Hart, the chapter director for Startup Grind Grand Rapids, joined by my colleague, I have Yorgo Katsanos, and I believe he's still in Ohio right now. And then also our very special guest, we have Bahia from Tunis. She is the chapter director for Startup Grind there. So excited to be hosting you today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for this invitation. I'm glad to be among you, even online, not physically.
Yeah, it's one day though. We will share a coffee and a meal. So you come to Startup Grind with a lot of experience already, and in your community, I'll let you tell the story, but from educator to mentor, like you do a great deal. So could you give us a little background on where you came from, what inspired you to be an entrepreneur, and what is it that you're doing now?
So I started like in 11, 12 years ago, just when I graduated in marketing, to work in digital. The digital started back then, so Facebook didn't look like Facebook nowadays. No Instagram, no TikTok, no other apps. And I started working in digital advertising agency here in Tunis. Then I switched to international agency also based in Tunisia. In the meanwhile, I was kind of a geek. So I founded with a friend a club named Social Media Club Tunisia, which aimed to train students or to train NGOs on the use of social media. As you know, social media is good, but you have to use it wisely. I started in the meantime teaching at the university courses about digital marketing. Back in 2014, it was, I think, my 30-year career crisis. So I kind of was fed up from corporation and working with the brands and the capitalism and those kind of stuff. So I switched to working with NGOs. And then I worked a little bit with entrepreneur. It was a start, a little bit of entrepreneurs. So there were the first co-working space. So it was kind of weird and creepy to see people working at the same time. They don't belong to the same company, sharing the same spacing, sharing the same energy. I had the opportunity to deliver some trainings or some, not mentorship in the word of mentorship, but at least give some advices whenever I got the chance. And from then I started working for my own because I wanted freedom. People came to me for advice and asked me for training. I wasn't thinking about it, but I found maybe the right people in the right time. Like I tried one training, one consultancy mission. I said, okay, it's not bad. I can afford financially to try to start on my own. And here we go. We are 7 years after. And I kept my activities as a university teacher, and I was invited in several conferences, and every time the thing that I noticed that okay, the ecosystem is booming in Tunisia, and we're gonna talk about it in details later. We have the new Startup Act law. We have a lot of incubator. Name it. You have the incubator. There are courses in different university. There are events. There are hackathons. There are accelerators, funds. But people still don't know where to go, and they need that special arrow to show them the way. And 2017, when I was in the Web Summit in Lisbon, I've met a special young woman in the metro station. She told me about Startup Grind. We chatted a little bit for 2 stations. She was Denise Matthews, the chapter director of Gibraltar. And 2 years after, because I was busy and I didn't find, maybe I wasn't ready back then to start my Tunisian chapter in December 2019. The chapter Tunis was born. And the good thing that when Denise told me about Startup Grind, and when I started to look around and see on the internet, what is it about? So they're sharing the value and trying to do the thing that I'm trying to do. First of all, is educate. Besides like connecting the people, those things I'm trying to do them maybe on my own or without even thinking about them as so Startup Grind is here to serve those goals and help the community in the way that we can.
That's awesome. I know that the community is grateful to have you as a part of it, and for you to be introduced to Startup Grind by the Gibraltar chapter director, which is a very active chapter, like one of our top active chapters. Is it's kind of neat that just on a subway one day you're just like, here we go. Um, Now, I know Yorgo and I are both really excited to be hosting you because as we travel around the globe and talk to different chapter directors, you know, Tunisia is one of these, it's a remarkable story as far as ecosystems out of almost thin air are when we talk about. It was a bit of a slow start after the Arab Spring, but like you said, there was like the government passed an act specifically to help get the ecosystem going. And I read online that in 2019, pre-pandemic, there was just as much investment in startups from venture capital as there was in the 3 years prior. So a lot of growth real fast towards the end here. And I know Yorgo and I are excited to hear about how things have been going through the pandemic and now how your ideas are about where we're going to be emerging. Before we hit record, Yorgo was asking you to talk a little bit about the hot sectors. It's kind of hard to pick them out because everything's like booming, but if you could give us a little summary, that'd be awesome.
So maybe after the pandemic, or let's say during the lockdown and during the pandemic, the big peaks of the pandemic. So it was the trend was service e-commerce since people were in lockdown. So the startup that are providing delivery services and are doing delivery, whether for food, for IT equipment, for healthy food, whatever the type. So they were booming. Of course, for them, let's say the pandemic was a bad thing hitting all over the world, but for them it was an opportunity. For them, after the end of the lockdown, so maybe it was they had the challenge of keeping. It was a little bit impossible to keep those high numbers of delivery and of orders, but at least to keep a certain constant number of orders and not go back to zero orders per day, for example. Of course, during the pandemic, a lot of hackathons or events were about health tech providing solution during the pandemic. Some startups started working on platforms for a hybrid event. So since we are still not doing big events physically, so the hybrid events are the new trends, the ed tech, also the health tech. So we can't say that we have a trend, but everybody is trying to, or every startup is trying to provide a solution to a certain problem, and investors are seeing that, or even other actors from the ecosystem are helping them to rise during these times and to promote those services and to show the work done behind.
Yorgo, do you have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering how you actually expect, Bahia, the survivors, so to speak, and the innovators to grow in the next, let's say, couple of years. Because what we have noticed is that the period of the COVID did not go wasted. We had huge transformations, we had pivoting, we have changes in strategy, and the startups that have survived the last 18 months have actually grown stronger.
Exactly. So worldwide, the COVID happened quickly. It was a real, let's say, slap in the face because it was really aggressive and unexpected. So for the, let's say, for the startup that were really hit by the crisis, so maybe that you said they had to pivot or at least slow down, take the time to rest, take the time to work on their marketing or their communication, or to work on their another prototype for adaptation, and then go back to activity. For the other ones that were lucky enough to continue their activities during this crisis, so for them it was how to adapt also to this rise of order, to the rise of demand. Some startups faced the problem that their products were sold out or they can deliver, and it will be a bad thing since you got the client that are willing to pay for your services, and at the end they say, oh, we can deliver you or we can provide that service, or you tell them that you will provide the service but you don't do it on time, it's gonna hit your reputation, and it's not gonna good for your company. So it was a pivot maybe in certain level, whether financially to find a new finance, and there are some programs by some donors or by some active players in the Tunisian ecosystem. They are offering funds to help the startups in crisis. Maybe financially, like I said, maybe the pivot was related to human resource, like for people, maybe you will have to have some profiles, some people in-house that you didn't have before the COVID-19. How also to pivot at the end and adapt to the new way of work, since everybody is in a remote. So this was a big challenge also. Sometimes maybe we talk about what we see in the top of the iceberg of a startup, maybe on the external side, but for the internal side, how to survive internally, how to keep your team motivated, how to keep your team close, how to keep the work done without avoiding depression, without avoiding burnouts. I recall in the first months of the pandemic when we were on lockdown, so everybody was motivated. Yeah, free concerts online. I can learn new things online. At the end, you find yourself that you are connected like 16 hours a day, and you are overworking because you lose track of time. And at the end, your brain sends you signal that you need to slow down. So all of that was think that people had to pivot. So whether financially, whether with the human resources and the team, whether with the client, adapt to the new clients, adapt to the new behaviors of clients and your customers. So for example, for us in Tunisia, the e-commerce wasn't doing great. So it wasn't developed enough like other countries. So people are a little bit afraid of buying things online with the idea that says, I'm gonna buy something online, but probably I'm gonna receive another product, and they can lie to me. But when they faced the COVID situation, so they had to buy online, or they won't have food or something. So at least they were educated. So maybe also this whole situation educated some customers, changed, like I said, the behavior of some customers, and help people think about online. If we see now the platforms online raising, like name it, for any specific things, you have online pharmacy, grocery, whatever, name it, and you have platforms. Of course, the development of such businesses depends from a startup to another, but at least this COVID situation, maybe for the bad side, but the good side, prepared people for digitalization, whether for education, whether for e-commerce, whether for health tech, for everything, even for, I think, mental health. I brought us the subject of mental health and to speak about the well-being of human beings.
Thank you, Bahia. That's really interesting. You're essentially summarizing what Corey and I have seen over the last probably 18 months or so, namely the resilience and the fact that the startup grind community is weathering this challenge with some degree of success, but more important than that, able to capitalize on the experience gained. I think that is a very important lesson, and it has to do with what, again, we always find is that the frame of mind is one of positivity. Can you talk a little bit more about this frame of mind that you see around your ecosystem?
So it was presented and offered by certain NGOs or certain ecosystem actors. So it was a call for applications. So the startups has to fill certain key points to prove something, that they had to stop the activity 100% due to COVID. So it was a kind of a fund for help that can allow the startup to continue, not to close the door because they weren't able to pay their employees or wherever, and then come back to activity after the COVID.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm happy that Yorgo wanted to talk about the mindset because with your ecosystem being as busy as it is, and your population there, I'm reading that 39% of your population is under the age of 24, as of this year, and that also everyone, the ecosystem is being very mindful to create the talent that it needs in the pipeline for this innovation. Um, and can you speak a little bit about like how talent is moving? And since there is so much youth, is that where the innovation is coming from? Also, like innovation and talent coming from that youth?
Maybe I will start from the part of the students that I am meeting. So most of my students or the young people that I meet during my trainings or conferences, when you come to them with a job opportunity, they say, no, I want to open my startup. I have an idea. They don't even have the fund. They didn't have the business plan already, but at least in their mind, I want to be my own boss. I noticed a problem, and this is the solution I offer to this problem, and I'm gonna work I'm gonna launch my own company. I will co-found it with my friends or my colleague, and they start digging and looking for information for incubators or accelerators. It depends on the phase of their startup. So a lot of young people I'm meeting or I know around me are more into entrepreneurship than a full-time job, whether it's remote or on-site. Besides, maybe the young generation is resilient, and they have the survival instinct better than our generation, because maybe they witnessed the revolution. They came in times like everything is challenging, like revolution. Then you have COVID, that name it. They are not afraid, even their type of education, the programs that they're seeing. I remember, and I had a conversation with one of colleagues of mine, like talking about this new generation and how we started in digital marketing and how they are switching. And the outcome of this discussion, we said that the time that him and I took to learn something like 3-4 years sometimes, to see the platforms like Instagram, for example, being like that. From the start of Instagram, we witnessed how Instagram was a silly app to allow you to do some filters to the all the empire of Instagram. For them, like they know already Instagram, they are already content creator, they know how to do videos. For us, maybe I'm gonna learn, I'm gonna wait. So they jump more than our generation. They go out a lot from their comfort zone, and even the environment is really helpful. So you have a lot of programs, whatever information you want, Google it, you will find talks, you will find TED Talks, you will find podcasts, articles, whatever the type of content that you want to consume, video, articles, white paper, infographic, you're gonna find this content and for free. So that helps them also to develop this curiosity to say, why not? I'm gonna go on that road of entrepreneurship beside being my own boss, beside working for someone else.
That's awesome. I like that you brought up the topic of curiosity, because it's one thing to have ideas and it's another to have the curiosity to go find the answers, right? So let's imagine that Yorgo and I are two of these young people in your ecosystem, and we have a good idea. We don't want to get a job. We've come out of university. We're well educated, and we're curious. Now you've mentioned that there are a lot of people like us, okay? A lot of people with ideas, a lot of people well educated. Now, are there enough programs? Are we going to find like a lot of competitiveness trying to get into a program to help us out, or is it freely available to find some help?
I will say mostly available, because of course those programs, I'm not looking for just anybody, because they're gonna spend time, sometimes money, energy. They have their own experts. But at least when you apply, you find a list of things that you will write down to show you if you have at least the minimum, or jumping, hey, I have an idea, then the next day, hey, I have another idea. So there are a couple of incubators, and even maybe the introduction, especially for young students, that there are some activity that happen during the school year. So maybe some hackathons, some events, some actor of the ecosystem have some competition. It can be the start of maybe the mindset of entrepreneurship. So for example, we have here the operator Orange. So part of their CSR strategy, they have a digital center. In this digital center, you have a place where people can learn coding, and they have the Fab Orange, which is part of the many Fabs Orange all over France and Africa. And in this Fab, it's an accelerator, but for example, they have what they call the Orange Summer Challenge. It offers students an opportunity to work together. It's like an internship during summer, but at the end, it's a competition. So they bring together a lot of students. Then those students divide themselves to groups, and each group works on an app that is providing the solution. Then they compete against each other in a big ceremony where there are big juries such as the technology minister, as well-known people here in the ecosystem, and then they gain money. Well, for most of those startups, as you know, some of them are still young, don't know what they're doing. So they take the money and then split, but at least, or some of them can develop their app, and some of them are still existing. So those let's say, are some kind of beta tests, or those student events are some kind of beta test before going to the incubator, before going to the accelerator. Some of them don't go even to NAR accelerator or incubator. They don't ask for money. Maybe they have the love money that they help them fund and start their startup, and then look for funding.
Now, on that funding part, because of the digitization this last year, is it easier for us young people like Yorgo and I because we're, where there's young entrepreneurs there in Tunis, is it easier to find the angel investment or like the friends and family?
I think it's not related to age, but it's more about the resilience and how the startup will convince the entrepreneur. As you know, an investor is taking money to invest. It's like let's say, gambling. So you have to convince them about the survival and the long life of your startup, that your product, you have a minimum viable product, people to buy your product or your services. So a business plan that is clear. At the end, yeah, the investor, when they find a business opportunity, of course, they're gonna invest.
Now, Yorgo and I, we found some money, and the idea is good. So it's scaling. We've talked about how there's a lot of talent around, so we can find some talent fairly easy, I guess, locally, right? Now, when it's time to grow our business and scale it, Tunisia has a long history of trading with Europe fairly easily. So is that where people head when they think of scaling outside of the 11 million that are in your community, or what does the scaling look like?
Okay. Just before answering this question, I'm gonna just go back to the investor point. So I remembered last year I had an interview with another person that I met during the Web Summit. He's an investor based in Saudi Arabia, and he was investing in a Tunisian startup called Dabshi. And one of the things that we discussed is he said, I'm looking for 3 things in a startup to invest in. First of all, no solo founder or 2 co-founder. I need at least 3 people that take the decision and that are ahead. Why? Because 2, for example, if there is a vote, one will say yes, the others will say no, and then who's gonna take the decision? So 3. Let's say one of them is sick, one of them is dead, one of them just won't do it. So no solo or a couple of co-founders, at least 3. The other thing maybe, as you know, the trend worldwide is switching to a female entrepreneurship or green entrepreneurship, so it can help that your startup are working on those kind of things, or inclusivity. The other thing, that if you are a tech startup, for example, you have a platform, your project or your product is a platform or is an app, you have to have a chief technical officer inside. You don't have to have it like a freelancer, because you have to have this person 24/7 with you, or your startup won't survive. So maybe before looking for an investor, you have to at least understand what you are offering, first of all. And second of all, think also about kind of the mindset of the investor. For example, an investor that they're looking for green startups. It's an investor that they're looking for something, some kind of things. So try to dig around to understand more your investor, the personality, the thing that they're interested in. As I said, in internet you can find everything, so you can contact the funds or the investor. Most of them have websites and a contact form on their website, or at least an email on their Facebook page or LinkedIn contact at the name of the fund, and ask your questions. See what are the list of the startup they have invested in, to find this track or this habit, and then look for investment before saying I've tried and they didn't want to give you the money. Try to understand what you are offering and who are they before you go and knock the door for money. To come to your question, for Tunisia, we are kind of lucky, but a little bit doomed, because our geographic situation. So we have Europe, we are kind of near to Europe. We are in the MENA region with the Gulf region. We are in Africa, in North Africa. So it really, like maybe the trend of scaling to Europe is more rising, but there are different startups that, for example, I know a couple of friends I know, they started by neighbors such as Morocco. Other ones, they went to the Ivory Coast or Nigeria or Algeria or Libya. Others, of course, they went to France or to Portugal. So it really depends on the product, depends, sometimes maybe that what helps for start entrepreneur going and scaling in Europe, that the fact that they have a double nationality, French and Tunisian, that helps and maybe opens some doors. So it will really depends on the entrepreneur, the startups, and how they are scaling and which market is interested in their product.
That's cool. Thank you. Yorgo?
Yeah, the question that keeps on coming back to my mind by here is this. You are only about, a flight, a couple of hours away from France, a couple of hours away from Spain, a couple of hours away from Milan. So essentially, you are at that part of Europe where there's a lot of innovation in edtech, in feedtech, digitalization that covers, as you described very nicely a few minutes ago, all kinds of activities. And of course, there is a slowly disappearing mistrust, because people are getting better educated about the security embedded in online transactions. What do you see in terms of the generational divide? And in particular, I'm thinking here of online payments systems, on the secure payment systems, and so on and so forth. What do you see happening in this area?
If it comes to Tunisia only, it will take a little bit time, because for the online payments and the international transaction, it's kind of a tricky thing with the laws, and especially you don't have PayPal, unfortunately, here in Tunis. So, but some entrepreneurs find the solution of going overseas. Maybe we didn't mention earlier, for the gaming startups that they are working and they are scaling, and even they have created other startups in Malta, for example, which is very near. Other startups are switching to Estonia for their e-residency that helps them do international transaction. So for the payment, I think my point of view is gone. What will happen? It's kind of what happened with the Startup Act. So the Startup Act, it's a Tunisian law helping startups. So now we have the label. So you apply for a label. Of course, you have certain criteria each month. We have 10 startups, and when you are a startup with a label that give you advantage, for example, for export, for security, for many things that it's really helpful for the startup. But the rise and how this law was born, it was started by entrepreneurs, so it wasn't thing that political parts or politicians decided. So there are people working on the ground that found some things with the law that needed to be changed. They worked on it, they presented it to the Ministry of Technology and the Ministry of Commerce. Then they all worked together. They provided the law that was voted in the parliament, and now it's applicable. I think the same thing will happen with the digital payment and all the digitalization, because there are some obstacle, let's say it, in the Tunisian governments that don't allow young people to do freelance, to do transfers if you don't have, of course, full companies. So now there are some work that will be done, and hopefully our government and the couple months we'll find a new solution, or we'll have a new law that will be helpful for everybody. Because of course, if a startup or even a young person are providing money from overseas, so it can helpful for the economy.
Thank you, Bahia. One last question that I have from our perspective here in the Midwest, if you want, of the United States. Do you have the opportunity to collaborate with some of your regional directors? Because what we're beginning to see is joint events. We're beginning to see joint efforts. They don't need necessarily to be conferences. They can be round tables. That can be collaborations looking for common entrepreneurial outcomes, either from the perspective of the innovators or the perspective of the investors. What is happening in this kind of collaboration environment in your area?
So in my area last year, I started some collaboration with the chapter Setat of Morocco, but I did it as a consultant. So I delivered a workshop about storytelling for entrepreneur. We had a discussion since last year that we wanted to do an event, a joint event with the MENA region. So every time we try to work on it, there's something happening and trying to adjust, but there is, like you said, some collaboration with several chapter directors from Startup Grind, whether Morocco, whether Jordan, and trying to work together. But at least maybe the collaboration so far, it's a lot of helping each other, giving advice. For example, there is a chapter director of Jordan, Mohammed Salah. He was lately in Tunis, and he had a lot of experience than I did in Startup Grind. So he's given me some of advice on the lesson that he learned during his time. How to have a community, how to have a team that works with you, all those kind of details. So yeah, at least we have this, as you know, for Startup Brain, we have a lot of channels that we can communicate with, such as WhatsApp, the Slack. The thing that I used to do, unfortunately, before COVID, was whenever I'm traveling, I try to contact the chapter director of the city I'm visiting, at least to introduce myself and see them face to face, know a little bit more about their ecosystem, see if there are any events in the area during the time I was there. But it stopped so far. Hopefully it will be back very soon. So yeah, but at the end, yeah, there is this kind of community among us that is still there, and we're trying to work on events. We are still brainstorming, because as you know, since last year, I personally am fed up with online events. So we're trying to not have another, say, another conference. Yeah, another conference talking about entrepreneurship. So we are still brainstorming about the subject or the thing that we're gonna bring on the table that would be different, not just another conference with logo and people cheering.
Thank you, Bahia. One of the reasons that I asked you this question about collaboration is because you mentioned before an investor who had invested in a startup in Tunisia and he came from Saudi Arabia. What kind of cross-border flows do you see or do you expect to see as you're growing your ecosystem?
Maybe the things that I started to work on it this year is more to gain and to use the network of startup gains. So for events that I'm preparing for after the summer in September, it's to have things, since startup grind has a lot of people, has a big community, other chapter directors maybe can connect me with certain persons in some ecosystems that maybe our community don't have access to those people. And since the good thing about the online events, so it won't cost much to invite those persons, not when it was physical, you have to buy them plane tickets and accommodation and those kind of stuff. And even for those persons, maybe they're not available for 3 or 4 days during the stays in Tunis. So it will be only a couple of hours during our talk. So it's going that way, like to offer international or overseas expertise and speakers. So we did it last February with a business angel, an investor, entrepreneur herself, based in Dubai, Alisa Freha, and she talked about her experiences, why we chose Elisa to be our guest speaker. She has experience. She's an investor. She has an incubator, and in that incubator, she had a couple of Tunisian startups. She was in Tunisia. She knows a little bit the ecosystem. So her advices and her perspective was based on real things, not things that she learned on internet. So her advices were really helpful for some female entrepreneurs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When you mentioned this topic earlier, and before we end our visit with you, I want to make sure that we touch on it because we like to touch on the topic of equity with everyone we speak with. You mentioned women entrepreneurship, and when we look at the globe and talk equity, it's different for every region, every country, and every locality. So one reason why Yorgo and I do this program is because we want to help break down the barriers of bias, and so maybe you could help the community understand what does equity mean in Tunisia? Is it solely like gender equity, or what's the conversation like there?
Maybe there's the definition in theory and then the reality. I'm gonna start with something that happened last year when we had the Women's Month during last June. So our last panel was about funding and the big question of funding and VC and all those kind of stuff. And we have in our panel an investor, a man investor. We had a startup that has just raised money. It's based in France. And we have other two female business angels. So the question was, let's say, it was a vicious circle because at some point you find the investor saying we need to invest in women. Sometimes even our guidelines or agenda, we have to have like 20% or 30% at least female entrepreneur. And sometimes it's a little bit the ugly truth. They invest in the, let's say it's honestly, silly project because just they are looking for female. The woman is not ready, the product is not viable, but we did it just for PR and for numbers for our result, which is not good on the long term. And the other side, you find female entrepreneurs complaining, saying that we can't find findings and it's a man's world and all those things. So at the end, we came to an understanding that there is a gap between those two words, like female entrepreneur. One the thing that was discussed also during that panel, that the fact that men like can bond a little more easily than female when they are having a drink, or even with strangers, they are finding themselves on restaurants having a drink, they exchange cards. For female, we are a little bit more shy. We have the problem of the imposter syndrome. So female are not bragging or not expressing themselves, or even if they have a good startup, a good project, but just it's the silly imposter syndrome that takes over compared to men, that sometimes the startup is really nothing, they have nothing, no minimum viable project, nothing, but when they tell the story, when they pitch, they are convincing. So there's sometimes even some soft skills that some female have to work on, and this is why maybe some of the ecosystem actors or even some consultants are switching to those kind of coaching, some soft skills, overcoming the imposter syndrome, how to pitch, how to raise confidence, and all those stuff. So yes, there are a lot of programs. It's the trend, like you said, like female entrepreneur, but even sometimes the word that I hate, the two words that I hate, it's like female empowerment. Sometimes it's like, okay, there is a woman, let's take it from her hand and show her the way, but it's not like about that, the female empowerment. And the other thing is positive discrimination. At the end, it's discrimination. So you can say, yeah, I was positively discriminated because I am a woman, I get the fund. At the hand, you find the men that have a better project and they didn't get the fund because he's a man. So at least we have to be honest. We were fighting about discrimination, so don't be happy when you are the discriminator. So all of those things, there's some work, it's done. One of the things that my speaker that I mentioned earlier, Elisa, said to women was, ladies, the trend on those 2 years or lately was female entrepreneurship. So work on yourself and take advantage of the system before the trends switch to something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
A very Mediterranean macho female answer. I like that. Wonderful.
It was straight to the point and honest, at least.
Well, it's important. Especially in entrepreneurship, we don't have time. We have to have openness and we have to have candor. And without that, then we waste time. And we also don't know who we are or who we're talking with. So now, and I've had this conversation this last year and a half a lot about, you mentioned the word discriminatory or discrimination. Here in the US, we have a lot of conversation about racial equity. And as soon as there are programs to bring balance or equity, then the former oppressors are now screaming, "Oh, this is racist," to give money to other people, and it's the wrong word. It's discriminatory. It's absolutely discriminatory. But so like racist discriminatory is bad, but discrimination towards balance and equity is good, right? I don't know. It seems obvious.
It's a switch, just playing with words.
Yeah, exactly. And the outcome is important though, right?
Yeah.
And so it's behavior. So I'd like to learn a little bit more about you and have you talk a bit about some of the things that you're doing, unless Yorgo, you have any more questions about the ecosystem before we move on.
Yes, I do. And one of the things that I wanted to ask very briefly is this. Tunisia, Bahia, historically has been not only a trade center, but also a financial center. What is going on in FinTech?
Sorry, can you repeat the first part? I didn't hear it.
Yes, historically, Tunisia has not been only a trading center. It has also been a financial center. It linked Sub-Saharan Africa, the Sahel, North Africa, Europe, East and West. I mean, all kinds of old and new financial institutions were and are based in Tunisia, in Tunis. What is happening at the moment on that front?
I can't say it's still the case, but it will be developed, especially now with all the things that going down in Libya, and things are more quiet in Libya. Let's say, for example, not last month, couple of weeks ago, there were a big event in Libya where Tunisian companies and Tunisian entrepreneurs went to Libya, and another event here in Tunis. So for some kind of trade. So honestly, and I think nobody will know at least for the moment, because one thing that COVID taught us, nobody will know. We know nothing. We are all like Jon Snow in Game of Thrones. We know nothing. But maybe it's still like you said, Tunisia. We are lucky. Sometimes doomed. It depends on how you see the situation. But mostly, we are lucky. We are near to Europe. We are near to North Africa, to the MENA region. Sometimes we belong to all those things. So we are in Africa, and we have sometimes people saying, when I was traveling, you say, I'm from, where is Tunisia? North Africa. But you're white. Yeah, so as those kind of allegation. You are from, where is Tunisia, North Africa, so you are Muslim, related to the MENA region and the Gulf area, yeah. So why aren't you wearing a veil and you're not covering your shoulders? So those, this is why I said we are kind of doomed. But our geographic situation is really helpful. We are a small, pretty small country, but with big potential. And the good thing that we can travel the country and do all the things that you want, let's say in 10 days, that helps also at least to work from north to south, to go from other countries like nearly Libya or Algeria, like you cover the North Africa, like or the Maghreb United, and then go beyond overseas with Europe or other countries. So we will see what the future holds for this kind of political things, but we are still in the center of all those transactions and all those things.
So now
Thank you.
we have just a few minutes left, so I want to focus on you a little bit. Now we're emerging from various lockdowns in different parts of the world, as having still continuing to have issues with the pandemic. You, in your career, you're an educator, you're a speaker, you love to travel, like you're a connector. What kind of people are you looking to meet? So as Yorgo and I and the rest of the Startup Grind community are trying to help you, who are we? Who would you like us to introduce you to?
Honestly, anybody that can. It will depends on the mood I'm in, but at least sometimes we need on just for people, not say inspire, but at least exchange, have another idea, see over the sea, or look outside the box. Lately, I've been a little bit concentrated and talking with people on my entourage about the mental health, because at some point you notice all this drama. It's okay to say you're not doing well, or you need to take a break, or just you can't do. For example, I stopped my online training, even if they're well paid, but I stopped online training. I'm trying to work on the physical events, because with teaching, with trainings as a professional, so I spent like 24 hours speaking to a laptop and being on lockdown. So sometimes it's a lot to take on. Maybe I'm also thinking about like people helping each other in certain way, whether with idea, whether with inspiration, whether working on some causes that we believe in, or whether green or helping stray animals or things like that. In general, people that will provide something, not money, like something that you see, but at least a good feeling afterwards.
Okay. And then we ask this question for all of our guests. Now you've answered, like who the kind of people you're introduced to. Now, with your chapter, or for yourself or for your business, what can the global chapter directors do for you? So not just Yorgo and I, but because you have your podcast, you like I said, you do some traveling. What can Startup Grind do for you? You obviously do so much for everyone else. You're giving first, so now it's your opportunity to tell us what you want to take, I guess.
Maybe the thing that is part of the value of Startup Grind, which is connecting people, and then we will see all those connections, what will lead to, but at least connecting people, trying to change some people's perspective. I see from my case, I was on a metro station, Denise gave me a car 2 days later. Here we are, 3 years later. Here we are. Sometimes you meet somebody or you hear a talk, or for some of the talks or the events that I had, like maybe the people that they came to me afterward, they're not yet entrepreneur. They're still looking for themselves, but at least the topics that I brought help them gain a clear idea before saying, because like we said in the beginning, being an entrepreneur is kind of a gambling, or sometimes it's a Russian roulette. So especially with those uncertain times, at least educate, introduce, show something. Last year we had a couple of events about cultural entrepreneurship, and one of them was about the good, the bad, and the ugly of entrepreneurship, of cultural entrepreneurship. As you know, during the lockdown, all the cultural event has stopped. So some of them have switched online, but isn't enough for to survive. And even before the COVID, it's not wasn't that booming. They were always on survival mode. So the panel that we had was really about the good, the bad, and the ugly about cultural entrepreneurship. And we had the change that the people that were part of the speakers were talking without gloves. So they said the good, the bad, and the ugly, and it helps other people to learn for the mistakes. So maybe the things that can be also useful, like sharing the mistakes that you made, especially, for example, for my case, where people now, I'm trying to turn for consultancy. What I advise them, for example, find a good lawyer and find a good accountant. This is the things I didn't learn by myself. I learned by myself. I was the other thing that I've learned, I can't do everything by myself. I'm only human. Sometimes I have limits. So maybe share those kind of lessons. For people, it seems obvious. For others, they don't think about it only after you mention the problem that you had. Maybe from the outside they see that you are good, you are gaining money, you are popular or wherever, but in the inside, show the inside. Maybe this is also some of the things that can be helpful for everybody, especially in these times.
Mhm. Well, thank you very much. Yorgo, any last thoughts before we?
No, I simply wanted to thank Bahia very much for taking the time to open my eyes, at least, in terms of the work that she has been doing in Tunis. I have traveled in the past in Tunis, and I always found the warmth, the entrepreneurial spirit alive. And I look forward to continuing our dialogue with Bahia and she continues to build her business and startup grind in Tunis. Thank you.
Thank you, and please, if you come back to Tunis, let me know.
I will do that. Thank you.
Well, yeah, again, to echo Yorgo, so grateful for the generosity of your time today, especially in the evening. So really appreciate getting to know you, make your acquaintance, and we look forward to checking in with you in a few months' time to see how things continue to emerge. Let us know if there's anything that Yorgo and I can do for you. We are at your service.
Thank you also for considering me. It was my pleasure, and glad we had this talk. And yeah, I hope next time we will talk, we have a lot new things that are coming out in our small town.